I very nearly forgot to start the stream and spent 3 hours talking to myself. I thought I started it several minutes ago, but then as you do, I wander around the house, getting a drink or stretching my legs or whatever just before the stream starts. And I came and sat down a minute ago and thought, huh, that's odd. Normally there's at least one viewer initially, which I'm pretty sure is a bot, by the way. Like no one ever says anything in chat unless there's at least two viewers. But there's nobody, and I'd not clicked the start streaming button in OBS. Oops. But crisis averted. Though that would have been kind of funny if I had not noticed. So I was going to play Kerneth today, according to the schedule, but I decided to do more Hot Springs Island prep because I'm in the mood for it. I'm feeling creatively inspired. And I did a bit more work on this over the weekend from the Friday stream, and I think I had some hang-ups in the stream about how I should prepare things, which, like, sleeping on it and doing a little bit more has cured me of. Namely, I was not making monsters interesting enough. I was kind of operating under the idea that monsters, because the sample monsters in Whitehack are very very simply described, right? This is it. There's not much going on. We just got a bit of their special properties. I was kind of thinking, because Whitehack has this like freeform magic system, all of a monster's special abilities need to be like magic that's paid for with HP. But actually, I don't think that needs to be the case at all. So I've got one monster which I think is quite neat, which has a cool ability that I've given it, and I'm going to be statting out a few more of those today and doing some other stuff. But first, let's look at what I got done over the weekend. So, starting with the player's guide, I've not really thought about the character creation at all yet. I'm still not really happy with the Crabman. I might give it a mechanical boost, like better armor or better carrying capacity or whatever, to offset the limitation. Or I might just scrap it and just go for, human, elf, dwarf, the standard fantasy races. I'm still pretty happy with the list of vocations. I think they kind of fit for the setting. Maybe Explorer and Field Researcher, they kind of overlap a bit now that I'm looking at it again, but the others seem kind of okay. I don't really have any ideas for affiliations yet, but yeah, that's that. But what I have fleshed out is this hex crawling procedure. So I had a chapter entitled Life as an Adventurer, which kind of had a hex crawling section that I'd not fleshed out, and I've now decided to split that up. So I've got some rule stuff here, and there's going to be like some setting stuff here, possibly. I'm just to skim through the rules I've got. So exploration and travel is abstracted into watches. A watch is 4 hours long. Natives use shorter watches as they know the island better than you. And in a watch, you can investigate a point of interest, which may not take the full watch. You can explore the current hex, which may reveal a new point of interest. You can travel to a neighboring hex, but you may get lost. You can travel a known route to a point of interest in a neighboring hex, or you can travel a known route to a point of interest in this hex, which takes half a watch. And this is basically just copied from the Hot Springs Island stuff. So if we go here, we've got a little bit about, we get past this example, travel and explorations. I basically condensed this table, the whole 4 hour watches and natives using shorter watches, which I think is quite neat. The only like little bit I've added on is the distinction between traveling to a known traveling a known route to a neighboring hex and to this hex. The Hot Springs Island book doesn't explicitly say like how long it should take traveling a known route within a hex, so I just reduced that to half a watch. But otherwise, it's basically identical. I've got a little bit of referee guidance on this as well. So, getting lost, I've basically copied this from Dolmenwood. So, getting lost, there's a 2 in 6 chance per day. So, at the start of every day, I will roll for if the players are going to get lost, and if they do, I will roll for which watch that occurs in. I've also decided if they travel without care, for example, fleeing through the jungle, so if they're running away from a combat encounter, I'll roll another 2 in 6 chance to see if they get lost, because if they're not paying attention to where they're going, if they're just moving as fast as they can, then that's a bit risky. Point of interest, I I considered just saying, they find a point of interest if they search a hex, but I actually prefer a bit of uncertainty about whether you found all the points of interest or not. So I've put that as a 2 in 6 chance. Maybe 2 in 6 is a bit low. Maybe it should be like a 4 in 6 chance. But yeah, the point is, searching the hex might not find anything, even if there is something to find, because something I don't really like in hex crawling games is if you can search the hex and you find everything and you know that you've got everything for sure and that there can be nothing else in the hex that you have missed. I don't like it for a kind of like meta-gamey reason. Like if the players, if it's like a game where that is something the players know, that if they search a hex, they found everything, they know they have no further reason to search a hex, which then makes it hard to kind of introduce new things later in the campaign. So if the players have searched, say, I don't know, let's look at our map of Hot Springs Island. Here, Hex HS13, just picking the first one. And if searching it just like revealed everything, they would know that they've found all secret things in this hex. If I later decide I want to have a secret dungeon in that hex, then firstly, the players are not going to find it because they have no reason to search the hex again because they believe they found everything there. And secondly, if I like point them to it by giving them a clue, they'll know that this is something I have added in later. And I don't really like that. I like them to always be wondering, is this something we've missed? Or, just not knowing for sure exactly what has happened. And then, I guess we'll jump back to the player guide because this touches on camping. So next I got fishing, foraging, and hunting. I definitely wanted the players to be able to get food while on the island. And this is basically from Dolmenwood, so I've put the dungeon as a cornucopia to those who know how to use it. In addition to butchering any aggressive animals that attack the party, which is really going to be their main source of food, other than rations, you can spend time seeking out food in the wild. One character should roll a check to determine success, and I guess it'll be kind of negotiable which check is appropriate here. So in Dolmenwood, which I copied this from, there is actually a survival skill, so you would roll survival. But Whitehack doesn't have skills, it only has attributes. So someone might argue, I'm fishing, and that needs you to... I'm like spear fishing, which needs you to be very fast, so I'm going to roll with dexterity or something. I expect, in practice, like a standard attribute for these things will kind of quickly emerge. But in principle, pretty much anything could be justified. So yes, one check per group doing this activity. The characters can split into multiple groups to make multiple checks, but then they're in multiple separate groups. They might get lost or separated or, get into trouble, that sort of thing. If they spend all day on the activity, they get a +2 bonus to the roll. So they can fish, which needs a fishing rod and bait or a net, and this gives 2d6 fresh rations. They can forage, which I've decided this requires a trained roll. So you need to have knowledge of edible plants, which if we just look at our player backgrounds, like a druid would know that, an explorer would know that. Probably there's more groups that would give that. But I think someone should have some reason of knowing like which plants they can eat. And then success yields 1d8 fresh rations. And finally, they can hunt, which doesn't automatically give them food. It results in finding a nearby prey animal, which they then have to fight as a combat encounter. And this is going to give 2 rations per hit die. So hunting is going to give the most food, probably. But the other options are kind of safer. And then I've got my lists of random beasts, fish, fruits, and fungi, which I'll just roll on to determine what happens, what they find if they succeed. And just a little bit about how I populated these. So the fish, fruits, and fungi, these are all real-world tropical fish and fruits and fungi. So I've got 7 different types of fish. I have 2 results that give a swordfish, because these are the swordfish islands. So I figured swordfish should be, pretty common. The fruits, 5 fruits can be found anywhere, 1 that can be found specifically in coastal areas. And then I have 4 fungi. And, if they fish, I'll roll on the fish table. If they forage, I'll either pick whether it's going to be fruits or fungi they find, or maybe just roll a d10 and like combine the lists together. The beasts, however, are all taken from the field guide to Hot Springs Island. So we have boars, copperbacks, ducadres, and tabibaris. So a boar is, well, it's a boar. They're, dangerous, tough, but give a lot of meat. I have statted out a boar as being a 4 hit die creature, so definitely challenging for a beginning party, but that would mean 8 rations, which is not bad. Next, we have the Copperback, Ducadra, and Tapibari, which I've not really fleshed all these out. So the Copperback is 2 hit dice. I've not given stats for the Ducadra and the Tapibari. I'm definitely going to start with the Tabibari today when I'm starting out monsters. That's quite interesting, which we'll get into in a moment, I suppose. So the Copperback is a snake. It is a 3 to 6 foot long snake. So I figured that's something you could hunt and eat. The most common result on the table for this is the boar. Well, the boar and the Tabibari. I think they're the kind of staple like hunting animals on the island, and then we've got the copperbacks and ducadras kind of as extra things you might find. So I'm kind of looking forward to when the players first decide we need to hunt something because we're running low on food, and then I describe them finding like a literal snake, which will be an interesting challenge, not what they're expecting, I'm sure. The copperback has a venom. It's a sleeping venom, specifically, I believe. Yes. So the copperback will lash out lightning fast, inject its target with a venom, which is a powerful sleeping agent, and then the snake will flee. So actually hunting a copperback will be a little bit tricky. You need to cut off its means of escape and possibly wake someone up. The ducadre is this kind of large, it's like a dodo type thing, I guess. This large bipedal flightless bird, but definitely tougher than a dodo. It is 7 to 9 feet tall, and it's a pretty tough fight. So this is, I think, another thing you can find and eat. Essentially, I skimmed through the list of monsters, the bestiary, and thought, what could you possibly eat? And this one has meat specifically as a useful part. I think the main prey animal on the island is the Tabibari, which is this thing. The interesting thing about the Tabibari, which I'm kind of picturing this as filling the same ecological niche as like deer. It's a pretty like nervous creature. It's a herbivore. They travel in large herds. But the interesting thing about the Tabibari is that they share a group consciousness. So that's a rumor here, but it is confirmed in the Dark of Hot Springs Island, the GM book. So the more there are, the more their collective intelligence increases. So a normal herd has the collective intelligence of a 7-year-old human child. And the way I'm going to handle the Tabibari is... actually, let me just double check something before I lie about combat initiative. Here we go. Yes, so normally Whitehack uses individual initiative. I am going to have the Tabibari all act on the same initiative and display like uncanny coordination as they act. So they'll do things like some of them will charge different PCs and like try to like shove them apart into the paths of other Ducadre, who will then like try to trample them or something. So they'll display like perfectly synchronized group tactics all on the same initiative, which I think will be a really fun thing to do, especially if I do individual initiative for every other monster, because then when this first happens, the players will be like, wait, what? Why are these things all acting together? And I'll be like, yes, weird, isn't it? So yes, that'll be fun. Then we have our camping rules. So this is a much simplified version of the Dolmenwood system. So the Dolmenwood system, you need to gather firewood, gather water, cook food. You can possibly tell a an amusing story to help settle everyone in for the night, and then roll to see if you get a good night's sleep. I've kind of simplified it because Hot Springs Island has a tropical climate, and so, as I put most of the time, it's warm and dry enough to sleep out beneath the stars without shelter or campfire. This is not guaranteed. So setting up a camp, I decided since it's a jungle, you can find firewood pretty easily, so everyone who goes fetching wood can collect enough to keep it burning for 2d6 hours. And I think water is no problem. There's a lot of small springs, so water is going to be plentiful in most hexes. Some hexes it might not be available, but generally it will be. However, it will taste pretty bad of sulfur and minerals. This is kind of fun because one of the things you can actually find on the island is the ash vein tree, which if you take some bark and boil it in water and then like crush it and mix it in with something, it neutralizes the flavor. So I'm going to say it will also just neutralize the flavor of the water it's boiled in. And so the character, I'll describe to the players how awful the water tastes every time, and then they're going to encounter someone who will just like calmly crumble a bit of like bark into their water, and it will taste wonderful. You know, it's kind of adding a little bit of depth to the world. Like there's a way to solve problems here. Interesting plants. Keeping watch, pretty standard. You need at least 6 hours of 6 contiguous. I guess it's not really contiguous. You need 6 hours of sleep. Let's fix that. Where are we? Player guide hex crawling. Let's get rid of this sidebar. At least 6 hours of sleep. So then you have enough characters with them to do a watch rotation if everyone wants to be fully rested. And finally, there might be nighttime encounters. I wasn't really sure how to handle this. The obvious way is if someone is on watch, then they just spot everything well in advance. But I thought it could be interesting to add a little randomness to it. Like there isn't going to be an encounter every night, so I decided 2 in 6 chance. And if I roll an encounter and then going to ask, I'll determine randomly whose watch it happens in, and that character will have to save. If they pass, they spot the thing well in advance. If they fail, they do spot it in advance, but not with much warning. And if they fumble, or if they don't keep watch, they are surprised by the encounter. Now, I did want slightly different encounters for if they have a campfire or not. You know, if they don't have a campfire, encounters will be truly random. It's just whatever stumbles upon them as they sleep. But if they do have a campfire, you know, that's more likely to attract curious, intelligent things and keep away more bestial things. So if they have a campfire, I'm just going to roll 2 encounters and choose which one of them happens. The final kind of bit about of like outdoor stuff is the weather. The standard way, of course, to do weather is just to have a list of like 20 types of weather that you roll on every morning, which I was originally going to do, but I then found a couple of interesting blog posts about, you know, slightly different ways to do weather, and I came up with this, or I stole this idea of where the weather is either cool and dry or warm and humid, and it kind of flips between the two. So we'll have a period of, say, cool and dry days, which I'll describe as maybe there's like a slightly chilly breeze in the morning. Maybe it's kind of I don't know, maybe a little bit misty, like around the coast, overcast, whatever. And every day that this goes on, there's a 1 in 6 chance we have storms instead. Similarly, if it's warm and humid, they'll wake up. Maybe it's like they're just dripping with sweat, or even when it's dry, it's just baking with heat. It's just really unpleasant. And every day there's a 1 in 12 chance that it flips to storms. Then if we have storms, we have D3 days of high winds, heavy rain, just really unpleasant weather, and then it flips to the other type. So because the dice are differently sized, it will tend to have longer periods of like warm and humid weather, and shorter periods of cool and dry weather, which fits with the tropical climate. And I think that's just a really cool way to do weather, you know, because if you just have a flat list you roll on every day, the weather of one day isn't really influenced by the weather of the previous day, and that's not how weather works in reality. So it's nice to add like a little bit of memory almost to the weather system. And of course, there's lots of varieties of cool and dry and warm and humid weather, but I can improvise those. I don't need like a list of specific weather conditions. And last thing in this little section for the players is XP awards. So something I used to great effect in my last campaign was feats of exploration, which actually let's just find that. I'm gonna need to add an OBS source midstream. Oh my god. Let's quickly do something. Let's add a browser source. Thanks. Okay. I can't click the thing to verify. Let's not add a browser source. Let's just share a window. Okay, window capture. Here we go. Feats of exploration. So this is a nice little way of, as it says, like awarding XP for more like role-playing things. So the standard ways of getting XP in an old school game are for killing monsters and recovering treasure, the standard gold for XP. But you can give XP for completing quests and overcoming traps and so on and so forth. And if you're interested in seeing how this works out, there is a very good actual play series on YouTube called 3D6 Down the Line, who are the publishers of this. They've played Arden Vool and Dolmenwood and Gradient Descent for Mothership. And they use this as the GM uses this as a way to give out like extra XP to the party when they do things. So I've not used this as written, but I've taken the idea and used it in my previous campaign before they published the thing. I should buy this, check it out one day because I'm using their idea. But essentially, what I'm doing, let's get rid of this now. What I'm doing is I'm giving a bonus of the XP needed to get to the next level, a 5% bonus. So if we go look at the White Hack XP tables, the classes all have different amounts of XP. Let's say you are a level 1 death character and you complete one of these feats of exploration. You will get 5% of 1,450 XP. No matter like where you are in level 1, you could be at 1,425 XP. You would still receive 5% of the full 1,450. If you were level 2, you would receive... Actually, I guess that's double. That's maybe not the best example. If you're level 9... Do these double every time? They do. Anyway, okay. So if you were level 7, you need, what is this, like 46,400 XP to get to level 8. You would receive 5% of 46,400 XP. So the same like feat of exploration gets you more XP the higher level you are, and so they essentially help characters level faster without needing to get just exponentially more treasure every time. And you do need to explore to get these things, so it's not just like free XP for doing something easy. The top one is enter a hex for the first time, and then there's discover a new point of interest. There are 25 hexes and 3 points of interest in each, so you're going to run out of these. Confirm or disprove a rumor. This will incentivize characters to seek out rumors and to actively investigate them, which is fun because that leads to adventure. Overcoming a significant obstacle or hazard. This is up to some GM discretion. What is a significant obstacle or hazard? But this is the kind of catch-all for, we've solved a major problem that didn't involve a fight. Bonus. Then there's uncover a secret. Again, this is good because this spurs adventure, engaging with the setting, seeking out hidden things. That's what I want the players to be doing. Meeting a faction for the first time, likewise. Befriending a faction. So befriending a faction isn't going to be a short-term thing. That's going to be like you meet the faction, you get an XP bonus, then you have to spend some time kind of building up good relations with them, proving that you're people who can be trusted, maybe doing some missions for them, and then once this is played out and they trust you, you then get another XP bonus. So it encourages engaging with a faction for a longer period of time. And engaging with one faction will put you at odds with other factions, so this leads to the players, picking sides and getting involved in the politics of the setting. And finally, perform a great deed, which again is kind of fuzzy. It's there for, if we all say, wow, that was a cool thing that you just did, but it didn't involve killing anything or getting any treasure or meeting any of these other things. But that's what I've got for the player's book. So just what I'm planning to put in this life as an adventurer section. So getting to and from the island, there's a ship that goes there every so often. It's going to charge a lot of money, probably like a large portion of the treasure they recover. But it will be safe and it will be relatively frequent. Missions, I'm thinking. So I got this idea from this third-party reference here. So the job postings here. It could be nice to have like a list of things that people in the area generally want doing, something that the players can kind of default to if they don't have anything else to do. So, like, exploring is all well and good, but sometimes you want to make a little bit of money, and if you know that, I don't know, there's a guy in town who's always interested in buying Cahuga peppers, then and he pays a good price for it, then you can go to the island and seek out Cahuga peppers and explore a little bit and make a little money. Or if like the Adventurers Guild wants to get in good with the Night Axe Ogre faction, maybe they need like a gift taking to the ogres or something, just little things that the players can do if ideas run out. And finally, downtime. So I'm thinking White Hack uses training to level up. You have to actually pay money to get XP. So in most OSR systems, just recovering the treasure gets you XP. In White Hack, you have to actually pay it. And presumably this training takes time, right? So there'll be times when the characters are just like in town for a few weeks because, someone is training to level up. Someone else is maybe, I don't know, engaging in some downtime activity. So I'm thinking possibly downtime in Xi'an. I'm going to comb this for ideas. There's a few other like books and things with downtime activities in that I'll look at, but I think it could be nice to just have like maybe not a full downtime system, at least a list of ideas. And jumping back over to the referee book. So first let's just look at the monsters. Some I've actually statted out. So we've got the Fuegonauts here. So this has changed quite a bit from what I was doing on Friday. So on Friday, I had like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of the monster. I had like a few keywords about its personality, and then I had a bit about its combat tactics. I've stripped away most of that. We just have the combat tactics and any special powers it's got, because I figured I'm never going to be looking at this book, like this little booklet that I'm putting together by itself. I'm always going to have the Dark of Hot Springs Island and the Field Guide of Hot Springs Island open at the same time, which will give me the personality and details about the creature. So really, I just need to know the stuff that's relevant to like rules and tactics, or the stuff that's less obvious from the text. And tactics, I'm inferring it from the text, but then I'm doing things like saying the Combustrians, they use charge and trick. These are specific mechanical things. So it makes sense to like have this written down, so I'm not like I don't forget that these things exist. And the sample powers, I was like defining them all here, which made each description of everything that had magical powers. Its description is quite long. I've moved all the sample powers to a big list here, and I've referenced them by name in the monster descriptions. I've also started adding new abilities. So if we jump over to the Blindfire Carpet and Blindfire Vine, these are basically the same creature. It's just one is bigger than the other. And they both have the same ability. So if we look at the the Dark of Hot Springs Island, the plant will grab, constrict, smother, and consume its targets. And here it will crush and consume its targets. If we look in the field guide, it's kind of more of the same thing. They kind of grab you and hurt you while you're unable to move. And that's what makes them pretty nasty. As written in Whitehack, you cannot grapple. You cannot hurt someone you're grappling. Grappling is something you do instead of doing damage. I thought monsters don't need to play by player rules, which is something I should have had in mind from the very beginning. So I've just added a new ability called Constrict. And Constrict, it's a melee attack. It grapples, but it also deals damage. And then on subsequent rounds, you're going to double positive roll to hit, which is the Whitehack way of saying advantage. I think I was getting too caught up in what was written in the Whitehack book and not inventing cool abilities. When, the reason I'm having different monsters is because they do different things. If everything acted the same, there would be no reason to have different monsters. So I've got two other abilities. I have Knockback, which I'm using for the large monsters. So monsters with 15 hit dice or more, they all have a d10 damage die, which is what Whitehack says like very powerful monsters might have. The standard is d6. And they get this Knockback ability. So Knockback, they instead of dealing d10 damage, they can deal d4 damage to push or trip the target instead. Because again, as written, you can't deal damage and push or trip a target. It's done instead. But for a very large monster, like the Obsidian Giant, for instance, which is just a giant obsidian elephant. Like, look at this thing. It makes sense that this can lash out at you with one of its giant obsidian limbs, send you flying, and also hurt you. So that's why I've added this little knockback ability, and I also have this sleep venom, which a few creatures can do this. So the giant centipede and the copperback can both knock you out. The giant centipede, it's flavored as paralyzing you with agony, but it's basically knocking you out. So it's the same ability. So my monsters are a bit better now that I've kind of got over myself, and I'm happy making up cool abilities for them. And as an example of that, I want to go to the Coppermane Prowler, which is quite fun. So if we find it in the bestiary. So the Coppermane Prowler here, it's a wingless griffin with a mane of copper feathers. They build up electric charges by shaking their ruff and can stun, paralyze, and even stop the heart by transferring that electricity with a bite. 3 times per day with sufficient charge, a Coppermane Prowler can teleport 10 times d4 plus 1 feet, leaving a trail of lightning in its wake. That's a really cool monster. And so I just made up a little mechanic for it. So the Coppermane Prowler, it builds up d4 charge per round. This is a special resource only it has, which it can spend for bonus damage, 1 for 1. Or it can spend all of this charge, if it has at least 8, to teleport 50 feet and distribute the damage across all the targets in its path, with a max damage per target of 4. So this is fun. When the players engage it in combat, I can describe that. Let's get a slightly bigger picture of it. That it's shaking its mane, and they hear the crackle of electricity and the clanking of metal as it builds up this charge. And as it bites them, I can describe it as they're being zapped by electricity. And so the players will see that something special is happening with this monster, and then when it violently shakes its neck and teleports across through several of them in a bolt of lightning, it doesn't feel like I've just made up an ability out of nowhere. So that's very fun. And I think that's enough rambling about what I did over the weekend. So let's flesh out some more monsters. And the ones I want to start with today are the Tabibari. So as I mentioned, this is the I'm thinking of it as a deer, but it doesn't really look like a deer. But the deer-like thing that has a communal mind. So the special ability of this thing is they're all going to act on the same initiative. And I'm also kind of interested in the Vidorak creatures. So this is a group of insect creatures that live in hives. So we have the Vidorak matron, which are 50 foot plus insectoid queens. So these are giant monsters. We have the Vidrac maggots, which are kind of the like weak infant form. Then we have 3 different special types. The Seekers, which are very fast and they go attack prey. The Swarmers, which find prey. I guess the name's kind of self-explanatory. The Swarmers, which travel in very large groups, can fly very short distances, and then attack prey that Seekers are found in mass. And then we have the Feeders, which are large and slow and will drain the blood out of dead bodies. So all these insects kind of all like work together. So I'm going to give them like some interesting synergy abilities. Yes, and one final thing to point out is the Boneback Wydar and the Crystalback Wydar. These are just bears. Just bears with slightly different tactics. So the bear in Whitehack, it has 5 plus 10 hit dice, so an average of 30 hit points. I've just given slightly different defense values based on their description. So the Crystalback Wydar is described as being, a bit harder to hit, but they're just bears. Just use bears. It always works. So let's write up a monster. We want to get a Tabibari. Let's find my bestiary. So I need firstly I need hit points or hit dice rather for this thing. So about 6 feet long and 3 feet tall, they're plant-eating herd animals normally found in groups. Thinking they're probably not super tough. If they live in groups, things live in groups because there's strength in numbers. But I'm curious what this third-party reference that someone made has. How did it stat them? So it put them as 4 hit dice, which is quite tough for what I see as probably the main prey animal on the island. Thinking they probably shouldn't be that tough. Otherwise, the food chain is basically the base of the food chain. It would be giant rats. Otherwise, if even the herbivores are like really really tough. Let's have a look at our list of monsters, see if anything catches my eye. But I'm thinking like 2 or 3 hit dice, probably. Kind of leaning towards 2, so fighting like a group of Tabibari would be tough for a like beginner party, but not insurmountable. And it makes sense that the inhabitants of the island would hunt these things down. Yeah, let's just go with 2 hit dice for the Tabibari. And a defense value. They do look somewhat defensive, I guess. Like the face has got these kind of like ridges on. I'm thinking like they look like a creature that like charges into things and headbutts. So it can't be super fragile. Yeah, broad bony nose. What else have we got here? Yeah, very bony. So I think they're probably somewhat tough. Maybe like leather armor or something. Let's have a look at our weapons and armor. Yeah, either leather or hard leather, I'm thinking. Let's go with leather. And then their movement speed. Does it mention them being particularly fast? I don't think it does. Yeah, I'll put them at like human speed, so like 30. That's kind of what I default to for most things. And these have a shared consciousness and are docile. Or maybe non-aggressive or something. Docile kind of suggests you could domesticate them if you wanted to. Okay, Takibari shared consciousness, non-aggressive, and so they're in our list at the beginning now. Yeah, get that all on one line. Shared mind, non-aggressive. So another fun creature is the Spine Dragon, which it's described as being completely invulnerable. Even if like a volcano erupts, it will just flip the Spine Dragon over, and it will just right itself and get on with its day once the volcano finishes erupting. So I give them a 20 hit dice, but they are invulnerable. Right, Tabibari. They have a shared consciousness, so they all act. With uncanny coordination. I think that's the key thing to get across. Like when the players first encounter a group of Tabibari and think, these things look relatively weak, we can just, get some, we just like kill a straggler and that's food sorted. Like the entire group the entire group of Tabibari should like react even before they could possibly have heard things. So it should like stand out as weird. Right, now let's think about these Vidaracs. So these insects that all kind of work together. So the Vidarac matron is obviously the toughest. It's a kind of like xenomorph queen type thing. The Vidarac maggots, I think, are quite weak. So yeah, it doesn't describe like big teeth or anything. Just as they can slowly chew through wood and stone and produce a mild acid. Let's see what the bestiary says. Like, yeah, look, we've got a person here for scale. This thing is giant. Blood goes in, maggots come out. Yeah, we've got the maggots. So they're called maggots, but they're still pretty big, 1 to 2 feet long. Oh yes, individual maggots capable only of spitting weak acid and slashing with claws encircling their mouths and sphincters. Lovely. So the danger of these is that they're in large groups. Then we have the Seekers, which they're definitely fast because they go out and seek out prey and travel around a lot. But it seems they mostly go for like ranged attacks. They will find prey and dust them with pheromones that then attract the Vidarac swarmers and feeders. So they might actually not be that tough themselves. They might rely on like aerial attacks and fleeing. The swarmers, these have to be a threat. I mean, they arrive in like large numbers. I believe it says somewhere like 2d20 plus 10. So what that's, you'll get around 20 at a time when they attack. These guys should be really bad news, and I think they should have some sort of like pack tactics. That will be a fun ability for them to have. And then the feeders, they're large and slow. probably not super tough by itself. I think the main fighting force are going to be the swarmers in terms of difficulty. So let's see what the reference says. So the matron, 20 hit dice. It is 50 feet big. That's quite large. Does it have like acid for blood or something? That would be fun. Yep, they spit acid. And can explode if they want to. Yeah. Definitely a large hit die creature. 20 feels pretty big. What did I give my other big creatures? Like 20 hit dice, that would be as tough as an obsidian giant, which I think is maybe a little bit much. As tough as a broadback. How large is a broadback? So broadback are 20 to 30 feet tall. Okay. So actually maybe 20 hit dice is about right. But yes, I'm thinking like 15 to 20, something about that. Let's just put 15. Let's make it a little bit weaker because it is going to be surrounded by a horde of other insects, and we'll come back to its other stats. I mean, it doesn't have a movement value because it's stuck in place. The maggots, I think these should be like 1 hit die creatures. Should be super easy to kill. Likewise, I guess they do have a movement speed, but like a really low one, like 5. You can keep up to a fleeing maggot with just like a slow walk. The Seekers, Swarmers, and Feeders. I think the Swarmers are probably the toughest. And then the Seekers and Feeders may be about as tough as each other, but the Seeker will be much faster. Ah, interesting. So this guy has put the Feeder as the toughest of these, with the Swarmers only 2 hit dice. Which I can see that if like 20 of them arrive at once, 22 hit die creatures are still a lot of hit dice. But I got the impression the Feeder was quite weak, or at least not that tough. Let's have a look. Yes, they're slow and show up when the fight is done, which is why I thought it was maybe a bit weak. I can imagine they're having like a high defense value because if they essentially carry the food back to the colony, they want to make sure that gets back safely. But I think I'm going to put these as somewhat weak. I'm thinking, honestly, maybe there's all 2 hit die creatures and it's their abilities that distinguish them. That kind of solves the problem. So, okay, the Seeker, it needs to be fast. What is a fast flying speed? I think 30 is like the standard unencumbered, yeah, human movement speed. So maybe that's probably pretty slow on ground. Let's say like 15 on ground, but like 60 at flying. So it's like twice as fast as a human when flying around. So it's actually pretty tough to catch up with. The Swarmers, do these things fly? Yeah, they They usually crawl or climb, but are capable of short bursts of flight. So they're going to have a very low flying speed, and maybe a faster movement speed. And say like, yeah, like they've got to be at least as fast as a person. Otherwise, you could just outdistance them. So let's say 30 for like ground movement speed and like 15 for flying movement speed. And then we have the feeders, which let's kind of invert that. So I'll go 15 ground movement speed. So they're quite slow crawling along the ground, and 30. Actually, it says slow speed, maybe like 20 flying speed. Yep, let's go with that. I guess we need defense values for all of these things. So the matron. They are held in like a chitinous structure, much like a xenomorph queen. That's the obvious inspiration here. That's what they are. So pretty tough. Vidrac maggots secrete a stony substance similar to coral. So the queen is embedded in essentially a stone exoskeleton. So I think it's going to be basically like full plate armor. Let's go with that. Which would be a defense value of 6. And it is immobile. It's immobile and it has acid juices. Yeah, that's nice and vague. That covers both spit and blood. The maggots. I'm not even going to give it any defense value at all, not even a 1. It's just going to be super squishy. It also has acid juices. Yeah, they're all going to have acid juices, so let's just actually reformat this so we have the acid juices first. I don't like seeing the word juices so many times. Let's go with acid. Acid, acid, acid. The Seeker has acid and what does its thing do? Itching, numbness, paralysis. Pheromones. Yeah, let's go with that. Or like toxic wing dust. What's a good way of like summarizing that in one or two words? I feel it's a common like monster trope, like the winged thing like fluttering overhead and some sort of like weird powder kind of descending from its wings and affecting people. I'm just trying to think of what it's. I can just call it wing powder. Yeah, let's go with that. I know what it is. We have the swarmers. These guys show up in groups. When swarmers bite flesh, they lock onto a victim with their huge mandibles and do not let go. They inject a spike that pumps venom into their target, preventing blood from clotting and causing internal organs to liquefy. Okay, so they cling and have venom. And also acid juices. It doesn't actually say they do have acid juices. Maybe they don't. I suppose it's bad enough dealing with like 20 things that are clinging onto you if, like, without them bursting into acid. The Seekers also doesn't mention they have acid, so yeah. Let's get rid of that. And then finally we have the feeders. So we also need defense values for the Seekers and Swarmers as well. So the probably like leather armor, I guess. The Swarmer's probably a little bit tougher. Let's go with like maybe like cloth for the Seeker, leather for the feeder because it's bigger, and hard leather for the Swarmers. Oh, let's go for leather for them. So we have like a variety of toughness and abilities. That's fine. Right, and the feeders. Do these have any special powers, or are they just gross? I think they're just gross. Once a feeder hooks onto its target, the armored plates covering its face open, and a long, needle-like proboscis shoots into the creature to drain its juices. That's truly horrible. Yeah, I don't think it's got any special abilities. I think it's just gross. Well, they can all fly, I suppose. Except the... let's go for pheromones. So the maggots can't fly, and the matron can't fly. Okay, Vidorak Feeder. Flight, 2 hit dice, 2 defense value, 15-foot ground movement speed, 20-foot flight movement speed. The Vidorak Matron, 15 hit dice, 6 defense value, so it's like it's wearing full plate. No movement speed, so it is immobile, and it has acid for everything. The maggots, 1 hit die, no defense value, you can just stomp on it. 5 movement speeds, I can like slowly crawl, but that's it, and acid for fluids. We have the Seeker, Swarm, both 2 hit dice again. The Seeker has effectively cloth armor, the Swarmer has leather armor. The Seeker, slow on the ground, but very fast flying. It can outpace a running person, a running man like flying. And it has pheromone powder. That's a good way of putting it. Not like wing powder, pheromone powder. Yeah, there we go. And then finally we have the Swarmer. So reasonably fast on the ground, relatively slow flying, but it can cling, it can fly, and it has venom. And I feel like we've kind of talked about the abilities of all these things as we've gone through it, so hopefully we can fill those out pretty quickly. So, the Vidorak Feeder. I'll come back to this because it's actually I suppose it's just a little odd because it doesn't have any special powers. Okay, the Vidorak Maggots. How many groups? How many do you find with it? I suppose the encounter tables tell us. So the Hot Springs Island encounter tables are fairly detailed. So if we like roll up some Vidorak, for instance, let's zoom in here a little bit, or a lot. So we've got the, let's move this up and get rid of those bookmarks. So we've got here the Vidorak table, and we've got a row for the Seeker, Swarmer, Feeder, and Matron. And I believe the way you interpret this table, although it's not super clear, is you roll 3d6 and look at the column and that's what you get. So if I roll like a 3, we've encountered a Vidrach Matron and nothing else with it. But if we rolled a 4, for instance, we have a Vidrach Matron accompanied with 2 feeders, 12 swarmers, and 6 seekers. That's a pretty tough fight. If we look in the middle, so like 10 or 11, which I think is kind of the average, right, on 3d6, you're going to encounter like a lone seeker. And so you get this probability distribution of what sort of monsters you're going to encounter, which I think is nice. But this actually doesn't have maggots on. Do we have a random encounter? No, this is the only mention of Vidrach maggots in the book. Huh. I guess it just means you find them when you get to the nest, but otherwise you never come across them. How many do you find? Yeah, they're almost always encountered in writhing masses of 10 to 20 creatures. Okay. I guess you just find them whenever you find a matron as their infant Vidrax. Right, okay, so special powers of the maggots. It has acid fluids. So acid spit, it can spit weak acid. I think this is just going to be a really feeble creature. Let's say it just does a d4 damage. Yeah, let's go with that. It can only, so the standard damage die is a d6. Almost every monster will, well, a monster will deal d6 damage unless it's a really powerful monster, in which case it will deal d10 damage. Damage. Yes, with natural weapons to do a base d6 damage, though very deadly monsters whose damage potential is clearly beyond that of a human weapon may use the d10 instead, at the referee's discretion. I think this is so feeble it's just going to be a d4 damage. I don't want to like get super like precise over what exact damage is being done, but it's a maggot. It can just kind of wriggle on the floor. I think d4 makes sense. And you're only going to encounter these when you're assaulting a Vidrach nest with like a matron, a 20 or 15, whenever I put hit die matron and a load of other stuff. So they're kind of more of a distraction than anything else. Right, then we have the Seekers. So the Seekers, they okay, so they emit a powder that causes numbness and paralysis of the extremities. And the powder also attracts Vidrach swarmers. So it's kind of like the sleep venom, although not quite if it's only the extremities. So how did I describe this for like the copper back? You know, for like I don't know, yeah, weakness venom or weak venom. There might be something else that does the same sort of effect, so I'll note it down and add it to my list of common powers just in case. I think this is just like an area of effect attack, so it's like save to avoid it. And I guess how quickly do the other things show up? Hmm. This might be a situation for a usage die. I guess the thing to decide is like what timescale does it attract the other Vidorak on? If it is it on the order of like combat rounds? Probably not if these things are like off far from the nest scouting. It's probably on the order of like hours unless you wash. Maybe like tens of minutes if you're in the same hex as a nest. Which you probably are if you've come across. Yeah, let's say like d6 times 10 minutes is like when the rest of the Vidorak show up. So Vidorak Seeker flies overhead and dusts with weak. I feel maybe weak is the wrong word. It sounds like the venom is weak, not that it's venom that causes weakness. Also, it's poison rather than venom, I suppose, because it's a contact thing. But I'm just going to use the same word for both because I'm lazy. Nah, let's call it poison. Feels wrong using the wrong word. Okay, we'll call it weakness poison, and then it will go in our monster design. Don't need to note that it is saved to resist. Actually, no. This is a complicated enough thing. Let's just describe it here. Dusts with, let's just call it Vidorak pheromones. There's like a balance to be struck between having a nice list of like abilities and powers and stuff up front, and like not needing to flip around the book a lot. If it's something that's genuinely going to be used by multiple creatures, having it here at the start makes sense. But if it's only used by one creature, I'll just inline it in the stat block there. So Vidorak pheromones. So it causes weakness of the extremities. I think that manifests as like reduced attack value, probably. Let's have a look at like some attack value reductions and see what seems like appropriate. Is any like magic maybe? not really. Maybe something more like the strong. I'm looking for like an action that would weaken an enemy. Because I could just make it up, but it's kind of nice to know that I'm doing something that's roughly like balanced with other stuff in the system. Yep, I don't know. Let's just say save to resist. It's gonna be -2. I don't know. It could just be disadvantage on attack rolls. Then that's pretty serious. So you might get struck by it the first time, then you know, oh, I need to make sure I really avoid that next time. So double negative attack rolls for. I suppose if this is happening over the order of like tens of minutes, it can't last in combat rounds. It should last a matter of hours. Say 4 hours. So it's going to be about 1 watch. There we go. Fire direct pheromones. That seems a better thing. So it flies overhead and dusts with pheromones. The effects of Vidrac pheromones is you have to save to resist. Otherwise, you get a double negative attack roll for the next 4 hours. And if not washed off, it will attract Vidrac swarmers and feeders after d6 times 10 minutes. And these are hyperlinked. It's nice. Right, so then we have our swarmers, our feeders, and our matron to stat out. So the swarmers cling to you. They inject venom. What does their venom do? Causing internal organs to liquefy. I think I can just treat that as my sleep venom. You know, this is the kind of general purpose. It disables someone. Venom. I think having your organs liquefied would disable you with pain, if nothing else. I don't need to like actually model liquefied organs. That sounds pretty fatal. But I do need like a cling power, which I think does make sense to add to the common abilities, as it sounds like something other things might do or I might want to reuse. So cling. Oh no, this is my constrict ability. Yeah, there we go. So it constricts at melee range. And I think probably the venom, it can do that, like foregoing its damage, because it's not like a big powerful creature. So if it's doing like a special move, I think it has to do that instead of its damage. So it constricts and It can constrict in melee range and can inject sleep venom on a successful hit. Right, feeder and matron. So the feeder is just gross. It doesn't have any special abilities. I'm just gonna put that. Well, I suppose the other thing is, it's supposedly it's slower, so it's supposed to arrive after the Seekers have done, after the Swarmers have done their thing. So it hangs back. Yep, it hangs back until prey are disabled. It's just gross, no special abilities. There we go. I suppose prey is disabled. And we have the matron. So these things can spit acid. And they have claws. Okay, so yeah, it has a melee attack, which will deal D10 damage because it's very tough. Yes, it's 15 hit die, so it's in my powerful monster category. That means it can deal D10 damage and knockback. So let's note down that it has D10 damage. Oh, how did I describe that? Major damage, that's what I called it. Yes, just need to lowercase that. D10 damage, acid, immobile. Right, so yeah, it has a ranged attack and it can destroy itself. So I suppose that my standard ranged attack has been it's kind of like this like elemental. I suppose I can just like repurpose these two powers, right? And but yeah, just treat them as non-magical like acid abilities. You can spit acid as an elemental bolt. Or self-destructs, which I guess should just be like a fireball, pretty much. So definitely more than D6 damage for the self-destructs. The actual nuclear option. Okay, can spit acid. That's a range attack, 60-foot range, D6 damage, or let's just format this like the maggot. So it's got melee claws, or acid spit, or self-destruct. which is, I guess, let's say like a 20-foot radius on itself, or 20-foot diameter on itself, or radius on itself. What's a regular fireball like? A fireball is a 20-foot radius. Okay. And I think this should be... So if it's a 15 hit die creature, it could be 15d6 damage. That's a lot of damage. Let's go to any dice and have a quick look. Let's bring up another browser source. Just in case you have never seen any dice, it's a very neat thing. So this is like a 15 hit die. If you were to do this like fireball, it would, yeah, be about 52 points of damage, which is quite a lot. I feel that's too much damage. So a fireball, yeah, even half, that's a lot. So if we look at what our player characters are likely to be like in terms of health. Yeah, so even like the absolute strongest player character is going to be on the order of like 60 hit points if they only go after this thing at level 10. So this is almost enough to like guarantee killing a 10th level player character. So I think if normal damage is a d6, an attack that deals 15 d6 damage is way too much. Maybe more like... Maybe we just go for like 2 d10 damage. So it's kind of like a last ditch. Uh-oh. Wow. My window capture, when I closed my browser, picked up OBS. Look at that. Let's say like, yeah, 2d10 damage. And save for half. So if you're lucky, the attack only deals 1d10 damage. But if you're unlucky, you get the 2d10. And this is, I think, like a last ditch thing. So this is if it's like on the verge of death, it will just explode and coat everyone around it in acid. Yep, Vidorak, Matron, melee, claws, or ranged, 60-foot range, acid spit, not split, spit. All self-destruct, 20-foot radius, centered on self, 2d10 damage, save for half. That looks good. See, I've got my Wide R's sorted and my Tabby Barry and Spine Dragon. If I just do the Zip Bird, then I've got kind of the last few creatures done and the first few. Yeah, we'll have this page done. I have kind of this like, yeah, I'll have like this middle section to sort out if I do the Zip Bird. Of course, I took all the other things in the other factions that aren't statted out yet, but I'll at least have a bunch of... I'll have most of the beasts done. Let's just do an easy one. As a little like quick break, we'll do a giant rat, and then we'll do the Zip Bird, and then we'll have kind of the beginning and the end done, which would be nice. So giant rat. A giant rat's like a one-hit die monster, right? Let's see, rats. Giant. Yeah, it's not even a one-hit die creature normally. It's a half-hit die. Oh, it's going to be one-hit die. No silly partial hit dice for me. Rat Giant. One-hit die. Surely it's pretty fast. I feel like rats are barely fast. Oh, it has a disease power. That's nice. Yes, so in OSC, a giant rat is a bit faster than a person, typically. So let's just go for that. But 45. I feel White Hack tends to use like multiples of 15 for speeds a lot. Oh, no, not 45 defense value. Was it's like a giant rat made out of solid unobtainium. No, 45 movement speed, and for defense value, it's probably about as tough as something wearing cloth armor. Yeah. And what, a diseased bite? Ah, excellent. Good old potentially immediately fatal disease. Yeah, diseased bites. Okay. I think generally a giant rat would just try to escape, much like the copperback. Yeah, it's like only fights when cornered, I guess. It only fights when cornered. It will bite and then flee. I guess I wouldn't roll like a separate die to see if it gets the disease effect. That can just be that its critical success ability. So on a crit save, I'll be diseased, and what is it? Just you just die. I might not go with that. 1 in 4 chance of being deadly. Probably just go for the bedridden ability. And a month is quite a long time. Though, if you can only like come to the island at set intervals, a month isn't so bad. Yeah, let's go with a month. I can always tweak these things if it turns out they're not fun in play. So that's our giant rat. Only fights when cornered. It bites and then flees. And the bites on a crit save or be diseased. And if you're diseased, you're bedridden for a month. Right, now let's sort out our zip bird, and then we have the first few beasts and the last few beasts and just some middle ones to sort out. Not that many actually left in the regular beasts, which is quite nice. Okay, zip bird. What are these things? Flightless white birds with powerful red legs. Zip birds stand around 4 feet tall. Although they do not fly, they can leap up to 30 feet. They cruise through rugged terrain at 15 miles an hour in packs of D6+1, screaming whoop whoop whoop. Packs generally harass potential enemies by zipping past them one bird at a time from multiple directions, leaving their true numbers uncertain. They love hunting coppermane prowlers. Okay, so they're very fast and conceal their numbers. I like it. Zip bird packs are often preceded by a steady stream of fleeing small animals. A pack of these creatures will attempt to kill anything once. Okay, so it sounds like they use a combination of like charge attacks, um, and yeah, kind of remaining in melee. So if they regularly hunt thingies, the griffin things, which I've forgotten the name of, Coppermane Prowlers, they must be about as tough as, or at least a group of them must be about as tough as a Coppermane Prowler. So they're probably like 4-hit die creatures, I'm thinking. Oh, he put 2 in this one. How tough was his Coppermane Prowler, though? 6. So his Coppermane Prowler is a little bit weaker than mine, and his Zip Birds are rather weaker than I was thinking. I'm going to go with my first instincts. I'm going to say 4-hit die Zip Birds. So let's just see kind of where that puts them compared to other things. Makes them about as, like, a little bit weaker than a Salamander Warrior. On par with the boar, that sounds about right. They're like boars, but they're birds. Yeah, 4-hit dice. I'll go with that. They're very fast, apparently. What did it say? 15 miles an hour, and um, isn't normal human walking speed like 3 miles an hour or something? Yeah, 3 to 4 miles per hour. So they're like 5 times as fast as a person. Which means they actually, if like standard unencumbered human movement speed is 30, these things move at 150. Which should be reflected in their defense values. Even if they're not like super armored themselves, they should be hard to hit because they're so fast. Probably like hard leather. Let's go with that. Yeah. Yeah, I guess the main thing about them is that they charge. That's very fast. But it's fitting with the name. You'd expect something called a zip bird to zip around. Okay, so what does it do? It tries to keep. They fight in groups. They attack in groups, trying to keep their numbers uncertain. Charge. Um, they retreat if outclassed, and I believe it said they'll remember an enemy. Yeah, if an opponent proves too daunting, they simply flee, shrieking into the undergrowth. The birds of a pack remember the creatures they challenge and will call for aid or flee if those creatures are encountered again. I'm not going to bother noting that they particularly hate Coppermane Prowlers. It's written down in the book. I don't need to copy everything. Okay, Zip Birds. They attack in groups. They try to keep their numbers uncertain. They will charge, retreat if outclassed, and remember an enemy. Perfect. All right, let's just start going up the list. So we've got the Poison Dart Frog. That sounds. I think there's like 4 or 5 types of these. Yeah, they have different colors. Okay, so red. So yeah, they all have different effects, which is slightly annoying. No, there are like three types of giant centipede, which have different abilities, but they essentially all boil down to you are paralyzed in some way. Like either you're paralyzed by pain, or you are like lost in confusion, or your limbs are numb. Which you can kind of abstract those all as the centipedes put you to sleep. Just describe it differently depending on the flavor of centipede, but the frogs sound genuinely different. So the red frogs, yes, and they're different. Some of them are venomous, some of them are poisonous. Probably the best way to deal with this is to not bother writing down the behaviors of the different poisons and just wing it if the relevant situation comes up. Because let's see, red frog, blood stops coagulating. That's that could be like you just take extra damage from every attack. The blue, lungs fill with fluid causing suffocation in 30 minutes. That's easy, you just die. Green, contacts poison. Black fungus begins to grow on and eat living flesh, will consume a human in 6 days. Yep, you just die. Yellow, highly susceptible to suggestion. That could be like a penalty to saves in relevant situations. Orange, immediate and uncontrollable vomiting. That means you're not doing anything other than vomiting. Yeah, I think it's the effects of the frog is if the condition of the poison applies, you save or suffer the ill effects. I'll just make it up. But they're pretty small, I think. No, they're frogs. They're not giant frogs, just frogs. Yeah, really larger than a thumbnail. And their poison is their only defense against larger creatures. So I'm thinking if you touch the frog or eat the frog or whatever, you save. If you fail to save, you suffer the effects, and that's it. So it's gonna be like a I'm just gonna call it a 0 hit die creature. It's got 1 hit point, and it can't do anything. It's gonna be pretty. I guess it's gonna be like human speed, which is very fast for a tiny little creature, but that's it. Counter attack and toxic. One hit point, no defense value. If the condition is met, save or suffer the effects. Done. Oh, really? Very nearly done with the beasts. I was thinking of maybe doing something else, like maybe fleshing out this, but it'll be very satisfying to get the beasts done, so I'm just going to keep working through them for now. Unless I see one that looks boring or complicated. Right, we've got the Muttering Serpents. This is kind of telepathic snake, I believe. Yes, the head of this 15 to 20 foot long snake always looks like the head of the person viewing it, even after death. Its scales are mirrored and it secretes an oil that smells of fresh wood shavings. Muttering serpents can read the surface thoughts of intelligent creatures and communicate telepathically. It only ever asks questions, and with light suggestion attempts to get individuals to go off alone. It can communicate with 8 people simultaneously, so this is a pretty interesting creature. The thing I want to think about this before just writing it down. It's going to have some magical abilities, I guess. Let's look at the Kuji bird. Okay, they're nearly extinct. And they have solid gold feathers. They can only be found in one place, which is not hyperlinks. Very sad. Let's have a look. HS 1803. It's isolated. Ah, yes. I think I remember this from the map. Let's find the map. Yes, so we got on this. That's even depicted on the map. So we've got this little island in a surrounded by a lava flow. The Kuji birds live on this little patch of jungle here, in this little island. Okay, this isolated island of life contains the last living Kuji birds in all the Swordfish Islands. Fewer than 50 make their homes here, and if they're not relocated soon, Svarko's volcano will bury them in several feet of molten rock. Kuji birds nest in large bowers on the ground that they weave from sticks and fern fronds. Males decorate the bowers with tiny piles of small colourful objects such as gems, coins, berries, and even fungus. Once a male Kuji bird sets its eyes on a new decorative object, it will go to great lengths to acquire it. Does it say how big they are? Did I miss that? About 3 feet tall. So it sounds like they don't have any special powers, and they look rather dodo-like, which fits with their impending extinction. What's this guy said about the Kuji birds? 2-hit die. That feels about right. I wonder if Dodo is it like a standard monster in OSC? No. But yeah, that feels about right. Not very strong. If it's a flightless bird, it's probably fairly fast. They're generally pretty good at running. So let's put it at, like, I know, like human speed. Yep. And defense value, I think like 2 is like leather armor. It's kind of like leather. It doesn't have any special properties. And its combat tactics. We don't get anything about like how they fight or anything. The field guide just says they're mythical. They might be around. Who knows? Okay. It does say a little bit. They can run in bursts as fast as 25 miles per hour. Okay. How do they know these things if the bird? Yeah. Many speculate that the rare Kuji bird is in fact extinct. Maybe these are like stories that have been preserved. Okay, so they do have like a sleep toxin. And if they can run at 25 miles an hour, I mean, that's even faster than the Zip Bird. I just put them at Zip Bird speed. The Zip Bird is already crazy fast. Right, Kuji Bird. 2-hit dice. Ludicrous speed. They have a kick with a venomous claw, which has sleep venom, and they flee. I do kind of feel like doing something else now that I've spent nearly 2 hours just on monsters. Let's have a look at this. What am I missing here? Okay. Character generation. I'm really not happy with the Crabman group. Crabmen, the labourers of Yoon Suin, usually confined to lowly station, but out here on the islands they can rise above that station. I've used the word station twice in too short a sentence. That's bad. Typical traits: strength, endurance, and swimming. Limitation: crabmen lack vocal cords and cannot speak. They communicate through sign language and gesture. Really, I'm only including these guys because I want to have Yoon Suin in the same world. I only want Yoon Suin in the same world so that if I run another fantasy campaign, I can put Yoon Suin in that world as well, and then I can be like, look, the 2 games are taking place in the same world, but the players are never going to go to Yoon Suin. They'll be too busy with Hot Springs Island. So I think I'm just going to get rid of the Crabmen. Let's see, player guide, character generation. So that leaves like humans, elves, and dwarves. You don't need a group for humans. They're just the defaults. I mean, there are other things that you could potentially be, like a lizard man, I suppose. But I think that's a species that I will kind of leave to be unlocked through play. Let's have a look at this again. Elves. So yes, I don't want there to be any actual elves. I want them to only be half elves. So true elves are incredibly rare, living in isolated communities in the wilds. But there's been much mixing between humans and elves over the millennia. Yeah, over the millennia. Get rid of. Let's go for over time. Much mixing between humans and elves over time, so anyone may be born exhibiting elven traits. Such people are colloquially called half-elven or even elven, depending on the strength of the blood. Typical traits: longevity, magical talent, keen senses. It'd be nice to get the word senses on this line as well, so I need to like shorten this by a word. Maybe commonly would. Probably not. I don't know. There we go. Yep, such people are commonly called half-elven or even elven, depending on the strength of the blood. Yeah, there we go. And dwarf. I feel I need to put more about dwarves, other than just what dwarves are. Typical traits: sense of direction, space, can see in low light, strong of gut and arm. Does Whitehack have anything about? So it's common. It's common for dwarves to get like a bonus to like resist poison or something. Is that a thing in Whitehack? Can a species group do that, or can a save do that? Anyone resistant or vulnerable to a hazard uses positive or negative double rolls, respectively. It probably fits in. Yeah, I could see just saying dwarves are resistant to, like, if you put your like dwarf species group by your, like, if you associate that with your constitution, I'd buy that for like saves to resist poison and stuff. Okay, dwarves. I feel bad saying you know what dwarves are after having like a whole paragraph about elves, but if I were to just pad it out, that's not adding anything useful. Like, the dwarves are just standard dwarves. There's explanation about elves because they're not, that they're actually all half elves. So maybe you know what dwarves are is fine. Yep. Okay, let's look at the vocations. So yeah, explorer and field researcher are potential. They're not quite the same. Like, an explorer, I'm thinking more. I mean, actually, they are pretty similar, I suppose. I mean that kind of like an explorer is more like a freelance field researcher, whereas a field researcher you'd expect to be like associated with a university or something, or a wizard's tower or whatever. I guess the difference is in motivation. An explorer is there to see the landscape, to see things that no one has seen before. A field researcher is there to um, study something in particular. So, I'm not sure if it's. I suppose these are just examples, so it doesn't really matter if they overlap a bit. Yeah, let's leave these as they are. See if there's anything missing. Druid, definitely gotta have that in a wilderness adventure. Field research. Well, they won't get any special powers. So the way that these groups work in Whitehack is you write it next to an attribute, and then in situations where your group would help and you're rolling that attribute, you get to roll with advantage. So say you put down your field researcher group next to your intelligence. If you're making an intelligence roll and it's relevant to your research, you would get advantage rather than having like specific powers. I feel thief doesn't really fit in with the others. The others are all like at least semi-respectable professions, and then you just got thief. Maybe that's why D&D renamed it to rogue because it sounds less bad. So, if you want to play like a magical character, you would probably pick the wise class, which are the ones that can do miracles and have like wizard as your profession, which should probably mean that you're knowledgeable about magical things. Yeah, treasure hunter, that would be a good one. The word adventure crossed my mind, but all the characters are adventurous. It's going to bring up a list of classes in Pathfinder because I know Pathfinder has like a billion classes. there might be some ideas, useful ideas here. Alchemist, that's kind of covered by like wizard. And again, it doesn't need to be like a complete list. I don't know, monks just don't really feel like they fit to me. Like that, everything else is like Western fantasy in D&D and Pathfinder, and then you've got monks, which I do I want rain. I guess ranger is covered by explorer. I suppose I can just give like a list of things, so like explorer or ranger, wizard or alchemist. Combine them a little bit, group them up. Actually, I feel Elementus is worth calling out separately because elemental stuff is a big deal in the adventure. Treasure hunter / rogue. Yeah, let's just flesh out like why these people might be here. Bicey does sound kind of boring. I agree. Let's go for marine because we have marines mentioned in the field guide. Paladins are generally on some sort of like divine quest or yeah, something divine. And similarly, I don't have a cleric because I've not really thought about the gods in this setting, and also I don't want to like stick them in without having thought about it. But I also don't really want to think about it because there's nothing in the setting really that is like connected to divine stuff. So I'd be introducing gods and whatnots just if someone wants to be a cleric or paladin. And I think, so I could like write like just a sentence about each thing. Yeah, I think maybe like a short, like dwarf length thing about each one, like what sort of things you might know or be able to do if this is your vocation. Or maybe I just have a bulleted list of them as they're kind of self-explanatory. Yeah, I think the like the holy association with paladins in role-playing games has kind of it's too deep to change. It's like the only one here I'm kind of inclined to maybe flesh out a little is the elementalist. Um, so I think it would be cool if at least one player picks an elementalist because there's a bunch of elemental stuff on the island. But I don't. If I write like something about an element, I feel I have to write something about all of them, and the rest of them are kind of self-explanatory. See, did I mention anything elemental here? No, not really. Well, I can just mention that in session 0 that it would be useful if someone played an elementalist, but of course they can play whatever characters they want. Or I could slightly redo things. Yeah, the field researcher thing is more of like an academic, whereas the elementalist is definitely more of a spellcaster. No, that's a strictly worse format than what I just had. Put that back. Maybe I go for a description list. No, the paragraph headings was the best way of formatting this. Yeah, I think I'll just go for a list of professions, or vocations, rather. At least for now. I definitely do need... No, let's be consistent with everything. Let's have like just a one-sentence description of each thing. And the key thing is, like, if I pick this vocation, what does it get me? So there should be something about like what they typically know, but I can fill that in later. It's probably better to think about what sort of affiliations there are, because I'm still like out of ideas on this. So I don't like any of these ideas for affiliations. Let's see if Whitehack has any like suggestions. Such groups can be guilds, schools, tribes, companies, secret societies, cults, or some other social structure. They may provide friends, knowledge, languages, equipment, refuge, and aid, and in rare case, even specific skills. So I think that the whole affiliation group thing is quite cool. It's a good way to like tie player characters into the world. Normally, I think it doesn't work so well when you're exploring an island that's like hundreds of miles away from like the nearest major part of civilization. Like there's a bit less scope to tie player characters into the world there. So I guess the difficulty I'm having with the affiliation groups is there isn't really a wider world to tie the player characters into, and even if there were a wider world, they're not going to go out there and interact with it because the campaign is exploring the island. Hmm. We've got some example characters, but it looks like they don't have the. Oh, we do have the groups for these. There's going to be like a bustling port town, which is how player characters will be replenished if they die, and where they'll spend downtime. But it's like a port town, basically to as like a base for exploring these islands. So pretty much everyone there will be like an adventurer or a merchant who has come to make money from rich adventurers, or someone else kind of there in support of adventurers. Yeah, maybe I'm just overcomplicating this. Um, yeah, I'll think about it. I guess let's write just like a little bit about each, like a little one sentence summary for each vocation. Like what they know, I guess, or like what the vocation might get them. So plants, animals, the natural order. Um, Healing, etc. Knowledge of the elemental planes, types of elemental beings, types and powers of elementals and their languages. Let's get rid of etc. That's kind of implied. Explorer / ranger. Plants and animals can find navigation in the wild. You have an academic / field researcher. I think it's going to go with field researcher because if you're an academic in the field, you're a field researcher. Knowledge of a specific field. So I guess you need to pick what sort of field researcher you are. Knowledge of a specific area of study and related people. And its history. Fighter / marine, you are good at stabbing things. I guess. Skilled at yeah, I think are skilled at being a fighter feels much more practical than being a field researcher. So you are skilled at rather than you have knowledge of. At assessing strength and weaknesses, battle tactics, and fortifications. Yes, you have knowledge of the way to kill things. Exactly. Treasure hunter / rogue. You are skilled at appraising things. That's a polite way to put it. At appraising treasures, opening locks, and detecting ancient traps. Detect the traps, yeah. And then let's get rid of the alchemist and just go for wondering whether I want to have it alchemist / wizard or just wizard. Let's go with wizard. So a wizard has knowledge of and is also skilled at. You have knowledge of magic. Yeah. The arcane. It's like something like this, just as like a one sentence summary of like what each vocation might get you. But yeah, these are only examples, so the players could pitch something else. So Druid, knowledge of plants, animals, the natural order, and healing. It'd be kind of nice to get them all in a single line. Well, that would look good, but I feel that'd be a bit hard to trim some of them down. Yeah, I feel that's okay. I think this is the only place where I'm using paragraph headings rather than like description lists or something. So it does look a little bit inconsistent with other things. Yeah. Yep, druid, plants, animals, natural order, healing. Yeah, let's change this to a description list, and I'll figure out how to kind of redo the species as a description list as well. Then it'll just look a bit more consistent with other, with like the hexachronic procedures. I've got like this investigate, explore, travel, and so on. Maybe I'll just remove the alternate words and just go for the more interesting words. Maybe just shrink field researcher to researcher. Which means this, if we're alphabetizing this list, this should go later. Yeah, if I can slightly reformat this like a single word spilling over to the next line doesn't look so good. Like, don't really need in the wild. Navigation is kind of always in the wild. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Make a note to do something about this. Yeah, I could just put it in subsections, actually. Or subsections. Maybe remove this, put it back on single line. Yeah, something like this, I suppose. I suppose I might want to have so normally groups just provide like a bonus to relevant roles, but species groups can also be like used by the GM to give you a penalty to a role if like your species would hinder you in such a situation. Like the example given in the rulebook is that maybe dwarves are very poor swimmers. So I suppose I might want to, in addition to like the typical traits, I might want to have like typical weaknesses or something. Something like strengths. Something like this. But with more thought about what a typical weakness of a dwarf is. Let's see, so sense of direction, I guess. And for the elf, it pushes these two over onto the next page. No. What if I got this down by one word? Then it would fit. Okay. It's a trim one word off this paragraph. Or move the word healing here onto this line. Okay, I like this first sentence. What line long sentence looks good. They say you should never start a sentence with the word but I disagree. I think this is fine. Yeah, there we go. So I'll need to think about what weaknesses elves and dwarves might have that's relevant to this setting. And I guess I want to capitalize this for consistency. Although here we have the word as the beginning of a sentence. So it's not capitalized. Yeah, I think this is fine. Okay, still don't know about affiliations. Let's think about this. Probably makes sense as. So I've got rid of the crabmen, but I think keeping sign language makes sense because it's a useful language to know. Or maybe it's more like hand gestures or something than a proper sign language. But yes, being able to communicate without speaking is useful, so I'll keep this as another language. Then if a player wants to say, I would know sign language because of such and such, then they can take it. The elemental tongues, I'm kind of thinking that maybe like each type of elemental has its own language, but they all somewhat overlap. And so if you know like the language of fire elementals, you can talk with them pretty well, like fluently, and you can basically get by with other elementals, but they'll kind of pick up on that you're speaking with like a fire elemental dialect. And there's a little bit about Ancient Elven in the field guide. So yeah, we have the Elven alphabet, which amazingly exactly corresponds to the Latin alphabet, just with different symbols. It's funny how that always seems to happen with fantasy languages. Now we also have another Ancients alphabet, which I think probably people wouldn't know because like specific to the pre-elves that lived on this island. Yeah, I guess Ancient Elven. It's pretty self-explanatory what it is. So it's useful if you find yeah, the language of the original inhabitants of the islands. It's useful if you find, like inscriptions or whatever, you can read it. Yep, a bit of a wordy description, but I feel that's the best way to cover it. So all elemental languages are mutually intelligible. It's a shame that word is broken there. But if you're speaking, say, Fire Tongue to a Water Elemental, they'll pick up on your dialects. Maybe remove the word tongue there. No, it's not Ancient Elven tongue, it's just Ancient Elven. Yeah, there we go. Sign language. It's self-explanatory. It's what sign language is. I feel that's probably enough for languages. So I guess there's probably a Dwarven language, but there's no reason for anyone to specifically like choose to know Dwarven, since nothing on the island is written in Dwarven. And then example characters. I think I need some affiliation groups before I can come up with an example character, which is annoying. But I do think it would be... Yeah, I'm kind of torn on whether it's useful to come up with example characters or not, because the Whitehack rulebook has example characters, so... I'm not really sure what my own example characters would add over these. Yeah, let's just get rid of the example characters. So it's just the affiliation groups I need to figure out, and the weaknesses of the species groups. Well, that's a good start. Equipment and services, I think this is mostly going to be... It's mostly going to be what's in the Whitehack book. I'll just copy over some things that's missing. I think the Whitehack book maybe doesn't talk about hiring retainers, possibly, or at least what they cost. Yeah. Whereas I'm thinking that the retainers you can hire here, as this is a adventuring hub, or at least, sorry, no, the mercenaries you can hire here, I think will be like a slight cut above your standard mercenary, because this is an adventuring hotspot. The retainers will just be using like standard retainer rules that you have to pay them a half share of treasure or whatever. And I was initially thinking with the money, do I want to use the silver standard? Because it's something I've kind of wanted to do for a little while. Like one gold coin is a lot of money, like historically speaking. In practice, most places use silver as like your standard large coin, and then smaller denominations for like your day-to-day purchases. And then gold coin was like was something for like major exchanges of value. So I kind of thought it would be nice to do a silver standard in a D&D style game, but Hot Springs Island has so much treasure that I actually think it would make sense just to multiply all the prices by 10, in which case you're back on a gold standard. So we're just going to use gold coins, and I'll maybe add a little note saying this is weird. It's that we're only using gold coins because everyone's so rich around here. But yeah, I don't need to like do anything special with coinage. I'll just say the coins are gold. Alright, it's downtime. Let's have a look at downtime in Xian and see if anything here catches my eye. Something worth keeping. So I'm thinking I might want to include downtime because there'll be periods where the players are not on the island for like days at a time when they're training. So it would make sense, or it would be good to have something that the characters who aren't training could be doing at the same time. There's lots of books with downtime stuff in, but this is just the one I happen to have. I feel probably not building an institution. Cultivating a relationship. This could kind of be for maybe befriending like a powerful NPC in a faction, possibly. I did kind of use this in my Arden Vul campaign for a few significant NPCs. I'm not feeling super inspired by any of these. I also don't. So carousing or revelry, as it's written here, is a super common thing to do in downtime. But I'm honestly not really a fan of carousing systems because the way they generally work is you roll a die to determine effectively how hard you party, and if you party too hard, you roll for a mishap. And the idea is that the mishap leads to further adventures. Like maybe the party really got out of hand and you ended up starting a fire and you had to like you're now in hiding because the authorities are looking for you. That sounds cool in principle, but at least what I found when I tried running it in practice was it was just kind of a distraction from getting back to the thing we actually wanted to do in the campaign, which was adventuring. Yeah, not really enthused by any of these downtime things, so maybe I won't pull in any of these. There'll be training and not really sure what else. I suppose you can make magic items in Whitehack, so that's a second downtime thing. Let's just start putting together a list. Training, magic item creation. How does that actually work? Yeah, crafting potions, bombs, scrolls, etc. works just like any other miracle, but the first charge, dose, or disposable item costs double. Permanent magic lowers HP until you reroll your hit dice for a new score at the next level. Yeah, so a wise character can essentially just invest hit points to create a permanent magic item. Which I guess would take a period of days, so yeah, that's a kind of downtime-ish thing. Let's see, thinking about what my players mostly did in our Arden Vul campaign, they spent a lot of money commissioning weird, like, special items, like protective suits for interacting with giant bees safely, or consulting sages. So I probably don't really need much in the way of organized downtime, actually, and they'll figure out ways to spend their money and fill their time themselves. They also spent a lot of time on spell research, but that's part of the leveling up for wise characters, and therefore part of the whole training thing. So maybe yeah, don't need a downtime section, I guess. What about missions? So the reason I'm thinking of maybe having missions is to provide like a default action for the players. So if they don't have anything specific to do, they could pick up a mission and go and do it. But I'm actually kind of solving that problem with the XP awards. So if they don't have anything to do, they can always go visit a new part of the island to get some bonus XP, which will then lead them into adventure. So maybe I don't need missions either. And then missions will kind of come out of the faction interactions. But I do need something on how they get to and from the island. But I have like a whole chapter for that. Maybe I can fit it somewhere else. But yeah, I'm thinking there's a ship that comes every like. I'm kind of torn whether it's twice a week or once a week. If it's once a week, then that means like camping out on the island becomes a serious concern. If it's twice a week, then you do still need to camp out, but it's less of like a major thing. Like if the ship comes like every 3 days or something, you're out there for 2 nights, which is much easier than being out there for a full week. I think maybe let's go for the ship comes every 3 days. I'm thinking they charge a very large amount of your loot, but they do pay fair prices. $50% feels kind of unfair, but I'll put that as a starting point. Ship comes every 3 days, charges 50% of the loot, and I suppose this is actually where missions could come in. You could maybe do a service in exchange for paying less. There's also an adventurers guild, which I think needs to tie into things somehow. Like there needs to be a benefit to joining the adventuring guild. I mean, I guess the benefit is that the adventuring guild is the one who produces the field guide to Hot Springs Island, which talks about all the creatures and things and has like a bunch of lore and stuff in it. But the way I'm going to handle the field guide is the players are going to start the game shipwrecked somewhere on the coast. I don't know where exactly. And they will have to make their way over to Hot Springs City where the ship is so they can get off the island. And so they're actually going to start essentially spending several days on the island just like very ill prepared trying to get out. And I'm thinking as part of this initial thing, at some point in those first days, they will find a dead adventurer who has in his backpack some supplies and the field guide. And this will happen after they've already encountered some of the dangers of the island and dealt with them. And so, like, receiving the field guide at that point will be quite satisfying and exciting because they'll be able to look up stuff and be like, oh, the plant that attacked us, that was a blind fire vine. And then they'll want to read the book. Whereas if I just start the game with them in the Adventuring Guild having the book, it feels like homework if you're given a whole book at the beginning. Whereas if you discover it in play and it solves a problem you have, that's much better. But if they have the book, then there's not really any reason to interact with the Adventuring Guild, as that's the only benefit it provides. Maybe that's fine. Or maybe joining the Adventuring Guild means that they get charged less for the ships, but you need to be like level 3 or something to join the Adventuring Guild. Or maybe you need to be, make it really easy, you need to be level 2 to join. And then they'll lower it to like 25%. Something like that. So they have a truly awful time at the beginning, where they're shipwrecked on the island, spend several days fighting things or running away from things or whatever, camping out in the wild. They get to a ship which can take them to safety, have to pay like half their treasure, and when they get back, hopefully have enough left to level up that they can join the guild and then pay less on the ships. It's a bit of a trial by fire opening, but hopefully it'll be fun. So moving from one hex to another takes like 4 hours. So you can travel like around the island in a couple of days, at the risk of getting lost. And you can always like stay on the island for longer, right? Like if the ship comes every 3 days, you don't need to arrive on one and then leave on the next. You could just leave on a subsequent ship and stay like for 3 days longer or 6 days longer or whatever. So I think that's fine. Let's see, where do I want to put this in here? So there's hex crawling procedures. It's like 2 pages with no space really. It doesn't really fit in character generation. Maybe I somehow like smush it into equipment and services, like getting to the island. Yeah, I think that probably makes sense. We'll get rid of this adventuring life chapter. So that's gone. Yeah, it's a money related thing. It's a service, I guess. It fits. Yeah, I think let's just work out where I'm pulling the rest of these sections from, and then we'll call it there. So this is just saying so it's a silver standard in the mainland, but everyone's rich here. So it's using the gold standard. The adventuring gear is going to come from Whitehack, plus any missing items from Old School Essentials. Armor and weapons going to again come from Whitehack. Lodgings and food. I don't think Whitehack has like inn prices or whatever. Like, it doesn't really have much in the way of money stuff. Yeah. I guess this I will probably take from like Dolmenwood. Trading is just Whitehack rules as written. Mercenaries, I'll take from Old School Essentials. And retainers from Carcass Crawler, which is the Old School Essentials zine. So yeah, I can just copy these things over, and I think that will cover it. And that's my player guide basically done. I need to figure out a few things in character generation, but basically done. But yeah, this little booklet shouldn't be massive because it's just explaining changes I'm making to the system we're using. The referee book is a bit longer because I've got all my monster stats in it, but even so, it's not going to be huge. I think it probably is just the monster stats I need to fill out in here, and then this is done. And then I'm basically prepared to run Hot Springs Island. Alright, I guess we'll end it here. So on Friday, I'll actually play Cone of Thalos like I was supposed to today. And hopefully we'll do better now that I know a bit about how to actually play Cur Nathalis. I believe I made a better character this time. Let's see, what did I change in my character? Ah yes, they're much better at scavenging and thievery. So that should really help with not being caught in like every trap I come across and actually be able to find food. So hopefully a much more successful Cone of Thalos game. And I'm also going to look into some of the other games by the same author. So he's got a kind of space horror one called Across a Thousand Dead Worlds, I believe. And he has a kind of religious horror one called Choir of Flesh. I'm definitely going to check out Across a Thousand Dead Worlds and see what that's like. I probably won't play it while I'm playing Cone of Thalos. I expect it to be like mechanically somewhat similar, but it's apparently more complex, and it's like a space exploration one, so that'll be interesting to look into. But yeah, that is it for today's stream, so thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.